The millionaire shocked everyone by revealing the black beggar who serves isn't anyone here. Chicago graphic designer Emily thought she'd hit the jackpot. Edward Vandergelt, a real-deal charmer with eyes that could melt glaciers, swept her off her feet. Boom! Next thing she knew, she was staring at a diamond the size of a robin's egg and being whisked away to their engagement party at the Vandergelt estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. This place? Forget everything you think you know about fancy. We're talking old money, the kind that whispers secrets from behind velvet ropes. The Vandergelt mansion looked like it was plucked straight out of a history book. All sprawling lawns, gargoyles, and enough chandeliers to blind a small country. Champagne flutes clinked, socialites gossiped. It was a scene. But even then, something felt off. Edward's mom, Marcia, was like a ghost in her own house, always looking sad, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. And Richard, Edward's dad, this guy was a straight-up patriarch, running the whole show with an iron fist. You could practically feel the tension crackling in the air when he spoke. One night, needing a break from the forced smiles and polite chatter, Emily wandered off. Ended up in a forgotten wing of the house. Dust, cobwebs, portraits staring down at you. Spooky stuff. And then she saw him. Silas, an elderly black man dressed in simple, worn-out clothes. He was meticulously polishing antique silverware, his movements slow and precise. He barely acknowledged her. Just there. A fixture. The Vandergelts' houseman. But the truth was way more twisted. Later, sneaking a glass of wine, or 3, Emily overheard Edward and Richard talking in the library. Their voices were hushed, but the words ice cold. Richard, dripping with contempt, revealed that Silas wasn't just some servant. He was the key to the Vandergelt fortune, a secret they'd guarded for generations. He's just a simpleton, Richard sneered, but he knows where the bodies are buried, figuratively and literally. Edward just nodded, like it was no big deal. Next morning, the Vandergelts were packing for their summer place in the Hamptons. Richard shoved a worn leather-bound book into Silas's hands. "Keep this safe, Silas," he barked. "Your life depends on it." As Richard turned away, Silas locked eyes with Emily, a silent plea. That night, she found the same book hidden under Silas's mattress. Inside, a faded photograph. Young Richard Vandergelt standing next to a black man who looked exactly like Silas, hanging from a tree. The date scrawled on the back. 1924. What the hell was Silas's role in this family? And what dark, twisted secrets was he hiding? Ei, antes de continuarmos com essa história incrível, preciso te fazer alerta importante. Muitos inscritos têm relatado que o YouTube removeu suas inscrições sem aviso. Dá só uma conferida rápida no botão vermelho aí embaixo para garantir que você ainda está inscrito no canal. Não quero que você perca nenhum conteúdo exclusivo que vem por aí. E já que você tá aí, deixa aquele like poderoso que me ajuda muito com o algoritmo. Ah, e me conta nos comentários de qual cidade você está assistindo. Adoro conhecer cada pessoa incrível que faz parte dessa comunidade. Sua participação faz toda a diferença. Vamos interagir. What the hell was Silas's role in this family? And what dark, twisted secrets was he hiding? My head was spinning. I slammed the book shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. Silas? Linked to something this evil? It didn't make sense. He seemed so gentle, so lost. I had to know more. Next. Morning. The Vandergelts were a blur of designer luggage and stressed-out assistants. Richard barked orders. Marcia looked even more haunted than usual, and Edward just watched, like he was detached from the whole thing. I found Silas in the kitchen, scrubbing pots with a quiet intensity. "Silas," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I need to talk to you." He looked up, those weary eyes meeting mine. He didn't say a word, just turned off the water and waited. I took a deep breath. I saw the book, the photograph. His face didn't change. It was like he'd turned to stone. "You shouldn't have done that, Miss Emily." "But who was that man in the photo, the one hanging?" He sighed, a sound that seemed to carry centuries of pain. "That was my grandfather. He worked for the Vandergelts, same as me." "But Richard said," he implied. "Mr. Richard likes to rewrite history," Silas said, his voice low and gravelly. "The Vandergelts, they haven't always been kind to my family." Suddenly, the kitchen door swung open. Richard Vandergelt stood there, his face a mask of fury. "What's going on here?" he bellowed. Silas flinched, but I stood my ground. "We were just talking," I said, trying to sound calm. Richard's eyes narrowed, locking onto Silas. "Get back to work. Now." He didn't even look at me. Silas lowered his head and went back to scrubbing, his movements stiff and unnatural. Richard glared at me, then turned and stormed out of the kitchen. As soon as he was gone, Silas looked up, a flicker of fear in his eyes. "You have to leave, Miss Emily," he whispered. "You're in danger." "Danger? From who? The Vandergelts?" He nodded, his gaze darting around the room. "They'll do anything to protect their secrets. Anything." Then it all happened so fast. A loud crash echoed from the hallway. We both jumped. Before I could even process what was happening, the door burst open again. But it wasn't Richard. It was Marcia Vandergelt. She was holding a gun, and she was pointing it straight at Richard. He stood there, frozen, halfway down the hallway. His face went white. "Marcia, what are you doing?" Her voice was a strained whisper. "It's over, Richard. It's all over." Then, without another word, she pulled the trigger. She was holding a gun, and she was pointing it straight at Richard. He stood there, frozen, halfway down the hallway. His face went white. "Marcia, what are you doing?" Her voice was a strained whisper. "It's over, Richard. It's all over." Then, without another word, she pulled the trigger. Bang! The sound ripped through the house. Richard crumpled to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. Silence. Then, a blood-curdling scream from somewhere upstairs. Marcia stood there, the gun still in her hand, her eyes wide and vacant. Like she wasn't even there. I didn't know what to do. Silas stood frozen beside me, his face a mask of shock. Then, Marcia dropped the gun. It clattered on the marble floor. She took a step towards Richard, then another. She knelt beside him, her fingers tracing the blood spreading across his shirt. "I had to," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I had to stop him." Suddenly, Edward appeared in the hallway, his face pale. "Mom? Dad?" He saw his father on the floor, Marcia kneeling beside him. His eyes went wide with horror. What happened?" he stammered. Marcia didn't answer. She just kept staring at Richard, her face blank. Edward rushed to his father's side, frantically checking for a pulse. Dad, can you hear me?" Nothing. He looked up at Marcia, his eyes filled with rage. "What did you do? What did you do?" Marcia didn't react. She just kept whispering, "I had to stop him." Edward grabbed her by the shoulders, shaking her violently. Why? Why did you do this?" Suddenly, Marcia's eyes snapped into focus. She looked at Edward, a flicker of recognition in her gaze. "He was going to kill Silas," she said, her voice clear and strong for the first time since I'd met her. He found out. He knew Silas was. She stopped, her eyes darting around the hallway as if she was afraid someone was listening. "Silas is your brother, Edward," she blurted out. "Richard planned to kill him to keep the truth hidden." The air in the hallway seemed to thicken. Edward stared at her, his mouth hanging open. "What?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. Marcia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It's true. Years ago, before I married Richard. Silas and I." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Edward looked at Silas, who was standing there, ashen-faced. "Is it true?" Edward asked, his voice trembling. Are you my brother?" Silas just nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and relief. The silence that followed was deafening. It was then that a sound came from behind us. Heavy footsteps were walking towards us, coming from the front entrance, and a loud and unmistakable voice was shouting, "Police, freeze! Show yourselves! Police, freeze! Show yourselves!" My blood ran cold. This was it. The whole crazy, messed-up Vandergelt world was about to come crashing down. Edward looked like he was going to pass out. Marcia was still kneeling by Richard, lost in her own world. And Silas, he just stood there, like he'd seen this all before. Then, the front door burst open. 2 cops, guns drawn, stormed in. Behind them, a whole bunch more. The house was surrounded. "Everyone on the ground, now!" one of the cops yelled. Edward, finally snapping out of it, put his hands up and slowly lowered himself to the floor. I did the same. Silas hesitated for a second, then followed suit. Marcia didn't move. She just stayed there, kneeling beside her dead husband, like she couldn't hear anything. One of the cops went over to her. "Ma'am, I need you to put your hands up. Now." She didn't respond. He gently took her arm and helped her to her feet. Her eyes were empty. They cuffed Edward, me, and then Silas. "Silas, what the hell was going on? What's happening? Why are you arresting him?" I shouted. The cop just ignored me. They were too busy securing the scene, talking into their radios. The whole place was chaos. As they led us out of the house, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A woman standing near the doorway, her face hidden in the shadows. She was watching us. It was Olivia, Edward's ex. The one he dumped me for, then suddenly dumped again? What was she doing here? She saw me looking at her and smirked. A cold, calculating smirk that sent shivers down my spine. Then, as if things couldn't get any weirder, she mouthed something that made my stomach drop. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes glinting with triumph. I was so confused. What did she have to do with this? Why was she thanking me? Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The way she disappeared so abruptly. The timing of all this, it couldn't be. But then I remembered something else. Something Edward had told me about Olivia's family. They were old money, even richer than the Vandergelts. And they'd always hated Richard. Hated everything the Vandergelts stood for. Oh my God. Olivia had set this up. She'd used me. She'd manipulated Edward. Manipulated me. Manipulated everything to bring the Vandergelts down. And then, as I was being shoved into the back of a police car, I saw it. A headline on a news van parked outside the Vandergelt estate. "Vandergelt fortune built on stolen legacy. Shocking family secret revealed." It was all over. Everything. But the worst part was, I still didn't know what that legacy was, or what Silas's role in it all really was. And that's when I saw Olivia again, standing by the news van, a phone pressed to her ear. She caught my eye, and this time she didn't smirk. She just smiled. A slow, knowing smile that told me this was only the beginning. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about something much, much bigger. Suddenly, she lifted the phone to her mouth, and the words she spoke hit me harder than any of this insanity. It's done. He's safe. Activate Nightingale. It's done. He's safe. Activate Nightingale. Nightingale? What the hell did that even mean? The ride to the police station was a blur. Flashing lights, sirens wailing. I felt like I was trapped in some twisted movie. Edward was beside me, his face buried in his hands. He kept muttering, "My brother, my brother." Silas just stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. He was like a statue. At the station, they separated us. Interrogation rooms, harsh lights, the whole 9 yards. I told them everything I knew. About Richard, about Marcia, about the photo, about Olivia. Everything. They didn't seem to believe me, just kept asking the same questions over and over, like they were trying to catch me in a lie. Hours later, they finally let me go. I walked out into the night, dazed and confused. The city felt different, colder. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, but who could I trust? Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Meet me. Central Park. The Bethesda Fountain. Midnight." I hesitated. This was insane, but I had to know. I had to find out what was going on. Midnight. The fountain. It was deserted, eerily silent. Then a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Silas. "What's going on, Silas? What's Nightingale? And who is that woman, Olivia? What does she have to do with all this?" I fired off the questions, my voice trembling. He sighed. "There's a lot you don't know, Miss Emily." "Then tell me, please." He looked around, making sure no one was listening. "Nightingale, it's a code. It means the truth is out. The Vandergelt's secret is exposed." "But what secret? What was Richard so desperate to protect?" He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "The Vandergelts, they didn't make their fortune. They stole it. From my family." "Stole it? How?" "My grandfather, the one in the photograph, he was a brilliant inventor. He created something that could have changed the world. But Richard's grandfather, he saw an opportunity. He mogered my grandfather, stole his invention, and claimed it as his own. That invention, it became the foundation of the Vandergelt fortune." My head was spinning. This was unbelievable. "But what was the invention?" I asked, barely able to speak. Silas's eyes met mine. "That, Miss Emily, is something you're not ready to know." Suddenly, a voice cut through the night. "He's right, you're not." We both turned. Standing behind us, bathed in the moonlight, was Marcia Vandergelt. But she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Olivia, and behind them, a group of shadowy figures. Marcia held up her hand, silencing any protest. "It's time you knew the truth, Emily. All of it." She took a step closer. "Silas is right. The Vandergelts stole a legacy, but it wasn't just any legacy. It was something extraordinary." Olivia smirked. "Something that could change the world as we know it." Then Marcia said something that made my blood run cold. "My father didn't just steal an invention, Emily. He stole a life. He stole a power." She paused, her eyes glinting in the moonlight. "He stole immortality. My father didn't just steal an invention, Emily. He stole a life. He stole a power." She paused, her eyes glinting in the moonlight. "He stole immortality." Immortality? The word hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. I looked at Silas, then back at Marcia. She couldn't be serious, could she? Olivia just smiled that knowing smile. "It's true, Emily. The Vandergelts have been living far longer than they should have. All thanks to your grandfather, Silas." Suddenly, one of the shadowy figures stepped forward. He was tall, imposing, and his face was hidden in the darkness. He raised his hand, and in it he held something that gleamed silver in the moonlight. A syringe. "It's time for the next dose," he said, his voice cold and emotionless. Marcia nodded. Richard was supposed to get his tonight, but things changed. He took a step towards Silas. "Then we'll administer it to his rightful heir." My heart hammered in my chest. They were going to inject Silas with immortality? Was that even possible? "No!" I shouted, stepping in front of Silas. "You can't do this. This is insane." Olivia just laughed. "Step aside, Emily. This is bigger than you can possibly imagine." But I stood my ground. I couldn't let them do this. Not to Silas. "Get out of the way, Emily," Marcia said, her voice pleading. "You don't understand." "I understand that you're all crazy," I yelled. "This is not right." Suddenly, Silas grabbed my arm. "It's okay, Emily," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "It's my choice." "What?" I turned to him, shocked. "You're going to let them do this?" He nodded. "I have to. For my family. For what they stole." Then he turned to Marcia. "I'm ready," he said. The tall man stepped forward, the syringe poised in his hand. He reached for Silas's arm. And that's when it happened. Out of nowhere, a deafening roar ripped through the night. The ground shook. The trees swayed. Everyone froze, staring around in disbelief. What was that? Then the fountain exploded. Water shot into the air, showering us all. The ground cracked open, revealing a gaping hole. And from the depths of that hole, something emerged. It was huge, scaly, and breathing fire? A dragon. A real, honest-to-God dragon. It roared. Again, a sound that shook the very foundations of the park. It spread its massive wings, blotting out the moon. Everyone screamed. The shadowy figures scattered. Olivia and Marcia stood frozen, their faces white with terror. I stared in disbelief. A dragon? Here? Now? It made absolutely no sense. But then I looked at Silas. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't running. He was smiling. A slow, knowing smile. And then he did something that made my blood run cold. He raised his hand, and the dragon obeyed. The dragon lowered its head, nuzzling Silas like a pet. Silas stroked its snout, a look of peace on his face. That's when it hit me. The invention, the stolen legacy. It wasn't just about immortality. It was about something far more powerful. Silas wasn't just an heir to a stolen fortune. He was a dragon rider. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a strange, unearthly light. "Come, Emily," he said. "It's time you knew the truth." And then he climbed onto the dragon's back. The dragon spread its wings once more, and with a final, earth-shattering roar, it soared into the night sky, carrying Silas and leaving me alone in the shattered remains of Central Park, wondering what the hell just happened. And then he climbed onto the dragon's back. The dragon spread its wings once more, and with a final earth-shattering roar, it soared into the night sky, carrying Silas and leaving me alone in the shattered remains of Central Park, wondering what the hell just happened. Seriously, what the hell? A dragon. A freaking dragon. I stood there, mouth agape, staring at the now empty sky. Olivia, Marcia, the goons. All gone. Vanished. Just like that. I stumbled back, tripping over a piece of shattered fountain. My phone buzzed. Again. Same unknown number. Go to the address in the next text. Don't trust anyone, especially not yourself. What kind of cryptic message was that? Don't trust myself? The next text came instantly. 45 Bleecker Street. Bleecker Street? That was a long way from here. And after that? Ugh, I didn't know what to do. Should I go? Should I call the cops? Should I just run and hide and pretend none of this ever happened? But I couldn't. I was in too deep. Silas was out there, flying around on a freaking dragon. I had to know what was going on. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address. The whole ride, I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting Olivia to jump out of the shadows. Every car that pulled up next to us made me jump. Finally, we arrived at 45 Bleecker Street. It was an old, nondescript building with a flickering neon sign that read, Joe's Fix-It Shop. Seriously? A fix-it shop? I paid the cabbie and took a deep breath. This had to be a trap, right? But I had to see. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The place was a mess. Tools scattered everywhere, wires hanging from the ceiling, half-finished projects flying on every surface. And the smell, like old metal and burnt rubber. Hello? I called out, my voice echoing in the cluttered space. No answer. I walked further inside, my heart pounding. Then I saw it. A door in the back, slightly ajar. I pushed it open. And that's when everything changed. The room was immaculate, spotless, and filled with technology I'd never seen before. Computers with glowing screens, machines that hummed and whirred, wires and cables snaking across the floor. It was like stepping into a science fiction movie. And standing in the middle of it all was Edward. But it wasn't the Edward I knew. He wasn't pale and confused. He was confident, in control. He was wearing a sleek black suit and a headset, and he was barking orders into a microphone. Increase the energy flow by 15%. Stabilize the temporal matrix. We're running out of time. He turned around, saw me, and his face went white. Emily, what are you doing here? Edward, what is this place? What's going on? He hesitated, then sighed. It's complicated. Complicated? You're standing in a high-tech lab, yelling about temporal matrices. That's beyond complicated, Edward. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a strange mix of guilt and pity. Emily, he said, his voice low and serious. I'm not who you think I am. None of us are. And then he said something that shattered everything I thought I knew about the Vandergelts. The Vandergelts aren't just a wealthy family, Emily. We're time travelers. Time travelers? Seriously? This was too much. Dragons, immortality, and now time travel? You're lying, I said, my voice shaking. This can't be real. He shook his head. It is, Emily. It's all real. The Vandergelt fortune, it wasn't built on a stolen invention. It was built on knowledge. Knowledge of the future. He took a step closer. My family, we've been manipulating history for centuries, guiding humanity, ensuring our own survival. But why? Why would you do that? To protect ourselves, Emily, from something far worse. Suddenly, alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed. Edward's face went pale. They're here, he whispered. They found us. Who's here? What are you talking about? He grabbed my arm, pulling me towards a large, circular portal that was shimmering in the middle of the room. We have to go, Emily, now. Go where? What's happening? He didn't answer. He just pushed me towards the portal. And then, just as we were about to step through, a voice echoed through the lab. Edward, stop! You can't take her with you! We turned around. Standing in the doorway, pointing a gun straight at Edward, was Silas. But it wasn't the gentle, weary Silas I knew. His eyes were cold, hard, and he was wearing a futuristic suit. "Silas, what are you doing?" Edward said, his voice trembling. Silas didn't answer. He just raised the gun. "I'm sorry, Edward," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "but she can't know the truth. For the sake of all time." And then he pulled the trigger. "Silas? Ok. Minha cabeça explodiu. Tipo, sério, explodiu. Eu ali, parada no meio daquele laboratório maluco, com portal brilhando e o Silas apontando uma arma pro Edward. Aquele Silas calmo, gentil, que estava servindo chá pra socialete há 2 dias, sumiu. No lugar, tinha um cara frio, determinado, vestido com uma roupa que parecia ter saído de um filme de ficção científica. Bang! O tiro ecoou pelo laboratório. Só que o Edward não caiu. Ele se virou rápido, tipo ninja, e o escudo de energia apareceu do nada, bloqueando a bala. "What? Silas, não precisa fazer isso!" o Edward gritou. O Silas nem piscou. Só apertou o gatilho de novo. E de novo. Os tiros ricocheteavam no escudo, faíscas voando para todo lado. Eu estava paralisada, sem saber o que fazer. De repente, o Edward olhou para mim. Um olhar desesperado, quase pedindo desculpas. Ele estendeu a mão. "Emily, vem comigo. Agora." Mas antes que eu pudesse me mexer, o chão tremeu. Uma luz forte invadiu o laboratório. E, então, a porta se abriu. E não era a porta do Joe's Fix-It Shop. Era outra coisa. Uma porta para outro lugar. Um lugar cheio de luzes estranhas e cores que eu nunca tinha visto antes. E saindo dessa porta, veio ele. Richard Vandergelt. Vivo. Mas não era o Richard velho, carrancudo, que eu tinha visto morrer. Era um Richard jovem, forte, com um sorriso frio no rosto. Ele parecia perfeito. "Surpresa, queridos," ele disse, com uma voz que me dava calafrios. "Sentiram minha falta?" O Edward ficou branco. "Pai? Como?" O Richard riu. "Ah, Edward, você ainda tem tanto para aprender. Achou mesmo que uma bala ia me deter?" Ele olhou para o Silas com desprezo. "E você, Silas, sempre tão previsível. Acha mesmo que pode nos impedir?" Então ele fez um gesto com a mão, e do nada mais pessoas apareceram. Pessoas vestidas com as mesmas roupas futuristas do Silas. Pessoas prontas para lutar. "O que está acontecendo?" eu consegui perguntar, minha voz quase sumindo. O Edward olhou para mim com tristeza. "Emily, meu pai não é um viajante no tempo. Ele é o tempo." O Richard sorriu. "Isso mesmo, querida. Eu sou o guardião da linha do tempo. E vocês dois são uma ameaça." Ele apontou para mim. "Você sabe demais. E você, Silas, você sempre foi um problema." E então, ele deu uma ordem. "Eliminem-os." A confusão se instalou. Tiros, gritos, luzes piscando. O laboratório virou um campo de batalha. Edward tentava me proteger, mas era impossível. Tinha gente demais. De repente, um dos caras me agarrou. Me arrastou para perto do Richard. "Não!" o Edward gritou. O Richard sorriu. "Que pena, Edward. Parece que sua amiguinha vai ter que desaparecer." Ele pegou uma arma, apontou para minha cabeça. E então, tudo ficou preto. Eu acordei. No chão. Sozinha. O laboratório destruído. Fumaça por todo lado. O Edward e o Richard sumidos. Mas tinha alguma coisa diferente. Eu olhei para as minhas mãos. Elas estavam jovens, lisas, sem nenhuma marca. Eu me levantei, corri para o espelho e não acreditei no que vi. Eu não era eu. Eu era a Olivia. A Olivia que tinha me manipulado. A Olivia que tinha tramado tudo. Eu passei a mão no meu rosto. Era o rosto dela, mas com a minha mente, com as minhas memórias. O que tinha acontecido? Como isso era possível? E então eu me lembrei do que o Edward tinha dito. Meu pai não é um viajante no tempo. Ele é o tempo. Será que ele tinha me apagado da linha do tempo? Me substituído pela Olivia? E o pior, será que eu sempre fui a Olivia? Peguei meu celular tremendo, abri a galeria e lá estavam fotos minhas com o Edward. Fotos de nós dois viajando no tempo. Eu não era a Emily. Eu nunca tinha sido. Eu era a Olivia. E eu fazia parte de tudo isso. Mas por quê? Qual era o meu papel nisso tudo? E onde estava o Silas? Onde estava o dragão? Eu olhei para o meu reflexo no espelho. A Olivia sorriu para mim. Um sorriso frio calculista. E então eu soube. Isso não tinha acabado. Tinha acabado de começar. E agora eu tinha um plano. Um plano para destruir os Vandergelts, de uma vez por todas. Mas antes, eu precisava encontrar o Silas. Porque eu sabia, ele era a chave para tudo. E eu precisava dele do meu lado. Mesmo que isso significasse trair a mim mesma. Ou a quem quer que eu fosse. Eu estava olhando para o meu reflexo. A Olivia sorriu para mim. Um sorriso frio calculista. E então eu soube. Isso não tinha acabado. Tinha acabado de começar. E agora eu tinha um plano. Um plano para destruir os Vandergelts. De uma vez por todas. Mas antes eu precisava encontrar o Silas. Porque eu sabia. Ele era a chave para tudo. E eu precisava dele do meu lado. Mesmo que isso significasse trair a mim mesma. Ou a quem quer que eu fosse. Peguei meu celular. As fotos da galeria. Eu e Edward. Viagens no tempo. Tudo falso. Ou melhor, tudo real, só que minha realidade. A Olivia. A raiva subiu, fervendo. Eles brincaram comigo. Com a minha vida. O telefone tocou. Um número desconhecido. De novo. Atendi. Diga, eu rosnei. Olivia. A voz do outro lado era calma, quase sussurrada. Você está no lugar certo. Mas não está sozinha. Quem é você? Alguém que sabe a verdade e que pode te ajudar. Encontre o espelho. Ele te mostrará o caminho. O espelho? Que espelho? A linha caiu. Olhei em volta do laboratório destruído. A fumaça ainda pairava no ar. O cheiro de queimado impregnado em tudo. Espelho. Tinha um no banheiro. Corri até lá. O espelho estava intacto, pendurado na parede. Olhei meu reflexo, de novo. Olivia me encarando. Ai! Passei a mão no espelho, procurando alguma coisa. Uma fenda, um botão, qualquer coisa. Nada. E então, vi uma mensagem escrita na fumaça embaçando o espelho. Quase imperceptível. Atrás de você. Me virei. E lá estava. Uma porta. Uma porta que não estava lá antes. Camuflada na parede. A porta se abriu, revelando uma figura envolta em sombras. Entre, a figura disse. A voz era familiar. Hesitei. Podia ser uma armadilha. Outra manipulação. Mas eu não tinha escolha. Eu precisava saber. Entrei na porta e caí. Caí num buraco negro, sem fim. Sem luz. Sem nada. Apenas a sensação de queda, de vazio. Até que de repente parei. Estava num lugar diferente. Uma sala circular, iluminada por uma luz suave e azulada. Paredes brancas, lisas. No centro, uma plataforma. E em cima da plataforma, o Silas. Mas não era o Silas. Era um clone. Uma cópia perfeita. Bem-vinda, Olivia. O clone do Silas disse. Eu estava esperando por você. Minha mente explodiu. Clones? O que diabos estava acontecendo? Quem é você? Onde estou? Eu sou Silas. Ou pelo menos, uma versão dele. E você está no coração da teia. O lugar onde a linha do tempo se conecta. A teia? Que história é essa? Ele sorriu. A história que os Vandergelts esconderam de você. A verdade sobre a imortalidade. Sobre os dragões. Sobre tudo. Ele se aproximou de mim. Você é importante, Olivia. Mais do que imagina. Você tem o poder de mudar tudo. de destruir os Vandergelts, de salvar o mundo. Mas como? Com a ajuda dele. Ele apontou para um canto da sala, e lá estava Edward, amarrado a uma cadeira, amordaçado, com os olhos cheios de terror. Edward, eu gritei. O que você está fazendo com ele? O clone do Silas riu. Ele é a chave, Olivia. A chave para o poder dos Vandergelts. E nós vamos usá-lo, para o bem ou para o mal. Ele pegou uma seringa, cheia de um líquido verde brilhante. Não, eu gritei. Não faça isso com ele. O clone do Silas hesitou. Olhou para mim com um olhar estranho. Você se importa com ele? Sim, eu disse. Eu acho que sim. Ele suspirou. Talvez você não seja tão diferente de nós. Ele jogou a seringa no chão. Eu vou te contar a verdade, Olivia. A verdade que os Vandergelts nunca te contariam. Ele se aproximou do Edward. Desamarrou a mordaça. Diga a ela, Edward, o clone do Silas disse. Conte a ela o que você realmente é. Edward olhou para mim, as lágrimas escorrendo pelo rosto. Olivia, ele disse, sua voz fraca. Eu sou seu pai. Eu sou seu pai? Não, impossível. O mundo girou. A sala começou a tremer. As paredes se racharam. Eu caí de joelhos, vomitando, sem acreditar. Meu pai era o Edward. Mas como? E por que ele tinha me escondido a verdade? E quem era aquele Silas? Uma versão do futuro? De outra dimensão? E os Vandergelts? Que eles realmente queriam? E o dragão? Onde ele estava? Eu não sabia mais nada. Nada fazia sentido. A única certeza que eu tinha era que tudo estava prestes a explodir. E que a culpa era minha. Eu sou seu pai. A frase ecoava na minha cabeça, destruindo tudo. Edward, meu pai. A Olivia, quem era eu? Uma arma na mão dos Vandergelts? Uma peça num jogo de poder que eu nem entendia? O clone de Silas me encarava, impassível. Edward chorava, amarrado. O coração da teia tremia, rachando. E eu não sabia o que fazer. De repente, uma voz forte, familiar. Silas, chega! Todos olhamos. Na porta, a figura imponente. O Silas, de verdade. Montado no dragão. O dragão rugiu, a sala inteira tremendo. O clone de Silas hesitou. Edward gritou. E eu senti uma esperança, uma fagulha no meio do caos. Fuja, Olivia! Silas gritou. Leve Edward. Eu cuido dele. O clone de Silas rangeu os dentes. Não vou deixar. Mas antes que ele pudesse fazer qualquer coisa, o dragão atacou. Uma rajada de fogo e o clone de Silas virou cinzas. Silas desceu do dragão, correndo até nós. Desamarrou Edward. Pegou minha mão. Vamos! Não temos tempo. Corremos. Através da teia, por corredores que mudavam a cada segundo. O dragão atrás de nós, protegendo nossa fuga. Finalmente chegamos a uma porta para o desconhecido. Para onde estamos indo? Perguntei, com a voz tremendo. Silas sorriu. Para um lugar onde os Vandergelts não podem nos encontrar. Um lugar onde podemos recomeçar. Ele olhou para mim, para Edward. Estão prontos? Respirei fundo. Sim. Silas abriu a porta. Entramos. E tudo ficou branco. Acordei. Numa praia. Areia branca. Água azul. Sol brilhando. Edward estava ao meu lado, dormindo. Silas estava perto, olhando o horizonte. Onde estamos? Perguntei. Silas sorriu. Um novo começo. Olhei para Edward. Ele abriu os olhos, me viu. Sorriu. Olivia. Peguei a mão dele. Pai. Ele apertou minha mão. Minha filha. Olhei para Silas. Obrigada. Ele deu de ombros. Ainda não acabou, Olivia. Os Vandergelts ainda estão por aí. E eles vão nos procurar. Mas eu não estava com medo. Eu tinha minha família. Eu tinha Silas. E eu tinha um dragão. Olhei para o horizonte. O sol se pondo. Lindíssimo. O que o futuro nos reservava? Não sabia. mas sabia que enfrentaríamos juntos. Família. Espere, o que era aquela sombra no horizonte? Grande, escura, se aproximando. E agora você. Sim, você que acompanhou essa saga insana até o fim. Acredita que acabou por aqui? Nunca. Mas para continuarmos essa jornada épica, preciso do seu apoio. Precisa se inscrever agora no canal. Não seja um mero espectador. Torne-se um guerreiro desta comunidade. Clique no botão vermelho e ative o sininho para não perder nenhuma das próximas histórias exclusivas. Esmague o botão de like agora. Mostre pro algoritmo quem manda e prove que você é um fã de verdade. A sua curtida é o combustível para criarmos conteúdos cada vez mais incríveis. Inunde a seção de comentários com suas reações e teorias. Qual a sua aposta para o futuro de Olivia, Edward e Silas? O que são aquelas sombras no horizonte? Queremos saber tudo. Sua opinião é fundamental. Não espere nem mais um segundo para compartilhar esse vídeo com pelo menos 5 amigos que precisam conhecer este desfecho. Espalhe a palavra, convoque a tropa. Vamos expandir nossa legião de fãs. Este é o momento para demonstrar seu apoio incondicional. Só os verdadeiros fãs entendem a importância de cada inscrição, cada like, cada comentário, cada compartilhamento. Vamos juntos rumo ao topo. Vamos lá!